Thank you for staying with us on Fafanua Africa. This is still a youth-based show, which is focused on, tackling issues that challenge the youth on a daily basis in Africa. Now, as part of efforts geared towards addressing funding challenges in the country's tertiary institutions of learning, the National Assembly recently passed the Student Loan Bill, which has faced much criticism, into law. Now, the bill, which was sponsored by Gbajabiamila, was titled A Bill for an Act to Provide for Easy Access to Higher Education for Nigerians through an interest-free loan from the Nigerian Education Bank established in this act to provide education for Nigerians. Now, on the repayment plan, the bill recommends that any beneficiary of the loan to which this act refers shall commence repayment 2 years after completion of the National Youth Service Corps program. It also recommended that payment should be done by direct deduction of 10% of the beneficiary's salary at source by the employer and credited to the student's loan accounts to be prescribed by the bank. Now, that would have been fair enough, but there's some other additions to these clauses that have got people talking. For example, to add to that, the Students' Loan Bill recommended 2 years imprisonment or 500,000 naira or both for students who default in repayment or anyone found aiding defaulters. Now you see why it's facing heavy criticism. But amidst all of this, the president has said that the government will begin implementation of this bill from January 2024. So today we're going to be talking about the different bottlenecks attached to these student loan bill and whether or not this is a good initiative in itself. And to join me, have that conversation, I am now joined in the studio by Femi Adeyeye, co-convener, Fund Education Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting Adeyeye.
Adeyeye.
So let's start the loan issue from here.
It's a pleasure. I mean, we have had this conversation on this show over and over again. So I think to some extent, I know what your thought is about the student loan bill. But I'm going to ask you what you think about, the implementation of this bill from January 2024 without addressing some of these challenges.
All right. I think the right way to start is to, first of all, look at what exactly informed acts. It's actually an act already because it has been passed into law.
Yes.
Without considering some of these bottlenecks you mentioned. And that's to tell you that the people running the affairs of this country are actually in total detachment from the people they think they are leading. Or else, I do not think that bill should have seen the light of the day because of the several, bottlenecks around it. What has informed it is the fact that the government is handing off public education totally. And the end goal is to commercialize and privatize public education in this country. There are different reports pointing to this particular thing. We have the Stephen Oronsai's report of 2013. We have the Wali Babalakin's report. A lot of these reports are saying that, you see, for university education in Nigeria, so that university students can compete with their counterparts, everywhere in the world, that they would have to pay between 400,000 and 525,000 as fees, tuition. And so for that reason, you've seen what they've come up with, which is the education bank. So what they're trying to do at the end of the day is to commercialize education, create another commercial chain around education. So education would no more be a social investment or a service to the people. It will now be based on who is willing to buy and who is willing to sell. So you're creating commerce around it. And that is why you would now have education bankers, you would have education consultants, you would have all this, chain of, profiteers that you should have. And that is why we are against it, that you can't put up this kind of, law in a country where you have 133 million people living in extreme and multidimensional poverty, where you have a minimum. Yeah, because it's dimensional, which means that you can even have cash in your pocket and still die because you cannot get healthcare in our public hospitals. In a country where you have 30% unemployment rates, you have 50% youth unemployment, which means that as we're seated here, the probability that one of us is not employed is 100%. You see, so that's these are some of the issues. So you do not place before the people another burden that would make them everlasting debtors, because that is what this government is doing with the bill. So it is, and I'm talking about the implementation for January they said it was going to be implemented they started from August. They mentioned August, they mentioned September, but now it is January. I think your guess is as good as mine. What's going to happen in January?
Right.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Okay, before we go further on this conversation, let's take it to social media and see what people are saying about this new development around the Student Loan Bill, or Act, as Femi Adeyeye has called it. Let's take a look. Now, Idiakosa says, we need grants for the working poor. We don't need student loans for the poorest among us. We need to fully subsidize them. A akara seller or a shoemaker should not have to take out loans to fund their children to tertiary education. Another person says, I think all universities should create an app. Students can easily apply and get the student loan to avoid bottlenecks as against manual application. Utilize technology for efficiency. I mean, this is 2023. Now, the newspaper stand says, the Nigerian Student Loan Bill has the potential to bring about significant changes in the lives of Nigerian students if effectively implemented, underlined. It can offer much needed financial assistance. All right, that's all we can take. Now, let's circle back to the issue of giving loans to people who cannot afford to pay. One of the clauses there, I can't remember the exact amount now, but it says that you should be earning, I think, about 40, what you should be earning. Okay, your family, the entire family should be earning 500,000. If the family is earning up to that in Nigeria, you are not poor.
And then you're not qualified for the loan. No, it is not. It is not, because this is it. Actually, it's looking at the Minimum Wage Act of 2019. Yeah. It says that that places the minimum wage as 30,000 naira. Let's say in a family of two, the father, the mother, so 30,000 naira being minimum wage per month. That is 60,000 naira. Yes. So 60,000 naira times 12, that is 720,000. So already you are above the qualification for, because the act says that 500,000. So people earning 30,000 naira are actually the poor. Yet you're telling them that those earning 30,000 naira are still not qualified. So who then are qualified for this? So it's to tell you that it is just a smoke screen to price education out of the reach of the poor. Totally. So what they are doing is, we are going to increase fees, which they've done actually in many of our universities, and we're fighting that. And then we say, but if you cannot pay, then go and take the loan. But when you get to that point of taking the loan, then you find out that you're not qualified for it, and everybody is stuck somewhere. You're not poor enough. I like that. You're not poor enough to get it, even when you're earning the minimum, the least wage in the country. So who then are qualified for this loan? This is just to tell you that they are not being sincere about all of this.
Well, I mean, giving loans to students in itself shouldn't have been a bad idea.
No grants. I know where you and if you look at it, even in the United States, which is the bastion of capitalism, where everybody wants to point to say, look at what they're doing. They are crying. The students over there are crying that we don't want these loans anymore. In fact, I think Obama paid off his loan when he was about becoming a senator. Yes. Over the years, had to pay off at the end of the day. That is in a country where the minimum wage is not $42. You don't have the kind of unemployment rates that you have in our country, at least to a reasonable extent. Yet, they still subsidize different things in form of social security. So you cannot bring that model and just bring it to an underdeveloped, because I don't think Nigeria is developing. You don't just bring it down here. When you copy and you want to paste, there are three options. Is either you paste with formats, merge formatting, or hard text. But what we do here is you want to copy and you're not even looking at it, you just want to place everything. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And those are the issues. And to also say, graduate after 2 years. I know many of my friends who graduated and they are not doing anything till today. Yeah. So these are the sad realities of the African young person today. And I think any reasonable government that wants massive industrialization, that wants the society to develop, to provide that kind of human resource that would drive us, should offer grants even to students. Yeah. Look at other countries that we can. There's a Nordic model that we can look at. Norway, Denmark. These are countries that they don't have crude oil like we do. Yeah. But it's just that education is not our priority. We can spend 160 million naira to buy SUVs for senators. It's because of bad roads. Bad roads, okay. And the poor people are not going through that. They are not plying those roads. Yeah. You get. So we can also pay a senator 13.5 million naira monthly. that would never cause inflation. But when you support students with 100,000, support grants, that's going to cause inflation, and the whole country will be on fire. It shows a high level of insincerity and wickedness.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the part of graduating and not doing anything, because I think that somehow we completely forgot about that in all of the clauses that we're adding to the act. There was another issue that came up on one of my shows, and we had to talk about the fact that there's a new government agenda of returning some out-of-school children back to school. Now, considering bringing children back to school, about 2 million of them back to school, and then giving loans, let's even say it's a very successful initiative, to people to finish school, and then all these people finish school and then there are no jobs, right? I feel like we're not considering that fact, that aspect of after school there's something else, There's just our major focus is on getting them educated, but they're educated and then there's nothing to do. That now brings the question, how do they now pay the loans? How do they now get jobs?
You see, it all boils down to the fact that we live in a society where policies are not properly thought through. And Nigeria is what it is today because the kind of economy we run is a petrodollar economy. It's an economy that imports everything to the point that you even import people to come and do what our people should be doing. There was a time in Lagos, Visionscape. Yes, they even imported people to come and clear the wastes of the things we consume that we did not produce. So it shows the level of import-driven kind of economy that we. So that economy then determines your kind of education. So an average mechanical engineering graduate is not being taught mechanical engineering so that he can export that idea to somewhere else. No, he's taught so that he can just work in the service industry. I have many of my friends who did engineering, but many of them are just carrying files in many of these oil companies. They don't really do the work. The people who do the work cannot even do your DYDX. They are from Philippines, they are from China, and places like that. So we must look at education through the lens of how do we make it a solution-driven education, whereby even when you're in school, you're already, coming up with ideas. You're helping the community to, and you are building the community. You're building the society with different ideas that can industrialize, that can, cause some of these things to happen. But what we do as of today is this gig economy. Everybody's selling shoes on WhatsApp, selling, wig, underwear, very funny things. Low graduates, and it's actually so sad that is where we find ourselves. So any policymaker, and in this time, the guys who are ruling the country must look at all of those things holistically. Education must be seen as a social investment, number one, and that this investment, if we invest into it, we are going to have returns from this investment. So if we fund education properly, we would have that's number one, a safe society, where because everybody is now educated to a large extent, the level of literacy is high. The guys you're not educating are the people Boko Haram are recruiting. So you have to, you have a choice: fund education or build more prisons.
That's strong. Okay, but coming back now to the issue of the student loan, right?
Yes.
We won't have enough time to break down all the clauses. But one of the things that have attracted mixed reaction is that prison sentence. Now, you wouldn't expect it to attract mixed reaction because, some people will say it's too harsh. Like, why would it? But some people would say that they know Nigerians, right? People in this part of the world are not exactly, according to Nigerians, we know the year word, right? So a lot of them will be like, this is just a mechanism to get people to pay. It's not a serious, but then is in the act. So what do you think about the jail term even being part of the clause?
I don't want us to throw it out of the window to think, it's just there to scare people and all of that. As an activist in this country who has been under political victimization, I've been incarcerated. I can tell you for a fact that people are in prison, in Kirikiri prisons, for having no means of livelihood. Yeah, I saw it myself. I was not told. I saw the charge sheet, no means of livelihood. So no means of livelihood, these are the people who work. So when this Sky and what are they called, task force, when they go for them, they just pick them up, throw them in the black market, and then go and drop them at Kirikiri prisons, and then ask them to pay 60,000 naira fine. These are people who do not have a means of livelihood. So do not throw it out of the window to think government is just joking by saying, we'll send you to prison. No. Nigerians are not bad people. What we have is that we have a bad system in place. Why is it that when Nigerians leave this country and they go elsewhere, they just start behaving well, like everybody's just fine. The guy who is not queuing up before starts queuing up. So it is the system that was in place that has. So it is about the system. So any policy thinker, any policy maker must look at all these things holistically. But do not throw it out of the window that they would send people to prison.
All right, Femi Adeyeye, co-convener of Fund Education Coalition. Thank you so much. It's been an interesting one. Again, like I always say, I would have loved for us to. Yes, it has become like a mantra, but I actually do mean it. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, that's why we call it a wrap on Fafanua Africa. Thanks for staying with us. Do join us again next week for another interesting episode of Fafanua Africa, where we talk about issues that affect the youth. Till then, I'm Blessings Osugu. Have a lovely day.